Welcome back to the Glow Up Girl podcast. I'm Kyra. Thank you all for joining. All right, let's welcome Vena to the show. Welcome, Vena.
Thank you, Kyra. I am delighted to be here with you.
Awesome. I'm so glad to have you. Well, why don't we get started by having you tell the audience listening or watching out there who you are and what you do?
Thank you so much. My name is Vena Ramphal, and I work with women leaders who are particularly in the public eye, and I help them to succeed by tearing up the good girl script, which is the one that holds us back. And particularly, I help them to amplify their stage presence and to take care of their emotional well-being so that they can create sustained success. And so my background is as a classical Indian dancer. I have been a professional classical Indian dancer since I was a teenager. And so stage presence and being in the public eye is in my blood. And I have carved a very unique route for myself in terms of my work. I've created a path where there was no path before. So I'm really excited about supporting other women to do the same.
Awesome. Yes, we love it. Okay, so one of the things, and how you work with the women is you really help you help the women that you work with to look at, themselves, to look at their relationships. And I think this is a really interesting conversation that we're going to dive in today, as we look at like, what are those potential things that are blocks to leadership? And I will have to tell you, never really thought about this until you and I started, our dialogue via, emails, forums, whatever. But to think about the relationships so for women, to think about the relationships with our mom, and what role does that play, as we developed into leaders ourselves, or we take that journey. So I got all like excited. I was like, oh my God, like let's dig in more. So let's let's start there to talk about how the energetic relationship between someone and their mother contributes to maybe hidden patterns that impact who they are as leaders themselves and their presence as a leader.
Absolutely. So here's the thing. I think often when we talk about leadership, when we hear about leadership, because as you know, there is plenty of conversation out there about leadership and supporting women in leadership.
Mhm,
But I like to look at what's happening off stage,
mhm.
because the way that you show up as a leader doesn't start when you are in front of the room doing your presentation. It starts way, way, way before that.
Mhm.
And the relationships that form our core identity, that's an important word, it's identity. So the relationships that form our core identity as we move through our leadership journey, they have this impact sort of from the wings, from the sidelines. And it's easy to miss them because of that. So if we're focused on, are we doing the right kind of job? How are we relating to the people in front of us? Are we thinking about team? All of those sorts of things. We tend to be focused on that, but we can miss what's going on in the wings. So this is more the identity work at a deeper, perhaps subconscious level, right? Because like you said, we don't often think about these things.
Mhm.
But what I have found, particularly in our relationship with our mothers, is that because that's actually the first relationship that we all form as human beings, right? If you think about it,
Mhm.
that relationship starts to form before we're born.
Mhm.
That relationship starts to form while we are still growing and developing in the womb of our mother. It really goes that deep. And that's how primal it is. And as we grow up, as we go through our teenage years, and even beyond that, that relationship can continue to inform our very sense of self and identity.
Mhm.
So, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later on. This is not to blame mothers. That's not where we're going to. That's not the direction that we're moving in with this. But it is important to uncouple yourself, as it were. It's important to unpeel your own identity from your mother's identity, right? To make sure that you are not living out her dreams or her frustrations. And I have to say, if there are any gentlemen in the audience, I'm sure there are, that this also applies to you, but actually in relationship with the father. So that parent relationship, it's like we have to really grow up at a deep level. And that means unpeeling our own identity from the expectations, the dreams, and the frustrations of the mother.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that is I think that's really interesting to look at because I think, like you said, a lot of people, as you're going through your journey or you're thinking about when you think about becoming a leader or anything that I've ever seen or read or resources, never has approached it from this angle of thinking about your relationship with a parent. And so, and even as you were speaking just then, I was thinking back to like just even, you can only think about your own personal relationship with your parents. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, wow, and I was like, when I was growing up, my mom was at one part of my life, she was stay-at-home mom. Then when we got older, she went back to work. So then it was like, but at the most critical time, I think, of like growth for me as a young woman, she was working. And so then it's like, oh, she was your, you see them as like, they're my parents. And I think I always tell people, I said it wasn't really until probably about 2020 during the pandemic when my parents both retired during the pandemic. And it was like that was the first time where I was able to like get to know my parents at the level of like a friend.
Mm.
And like they're not like just my parents anymore. It's like now they're my friends and I can have like real conversations with them about like real things. Whereas when you're young and when you're growing up, if you never like and to your point, it is like you're peeling back the layers because you only sort of have a surface relationship at some levels with like your parents because they're your parent. And you're like, I'm not going to tell them that because that's my mom. They don't need to know these things. But then like now it's just so easy to have like truthful, like they get everything.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's a really interesting point that it's kind of a two-way thing,
Yeah.
for the parent as well. They get to stop just being the parent and to be
Yeah.
more of themselves. And I think it's that moving into wholeness that
Yeah.
is that's the core human impulse that we are all seeking all the time is how can I become more whole? How can I become more fulfilled? And so that applies absolutely all around. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, let's dig deeper, right, into and yes, for my male listeners, you're going to have to work with us today, apply it to your side as well, but we're going to talk mother daughters to here today. So let's talk about that relationship and how that may impact us, without us realizing. I know we've touched a little bit, but you talk about something called energetic imprint and that it can be passed on from mothers to daughters. So how does that cause women leaders to shrink,
Mhm.
dim our presence, and also sidestep our authority? And how can we avoid this from happening?
Absolutely. So here's the thing. Those when I talk about energetic imprints,
Mm-hmm.
think of behavior patterns and thought patterns and emotional patterns. So if you think to your mother, I'm sure each of us will be able to recall particular kind of patterns of behavior, particular word sequences and patterns of thought, particular ways of reacting to certain situations. And again, I want to repeat, this is not about blaming our mothers, but it's about acknowledging that
Mm-hmm.
we would have been imprinted with certain restrictions just by being in her company and getting that kind of information. So, for example, if your mother always had a fear around money, for example, right?
Mm-hmm.
That money's
Mm-hmm.
it's a good one because it's very linked to leadership. As we grow in leadership, our financial well-being should grow as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if your mother had a fear about money, even if there was always plenty available, this is one that I see a lot for female leaders, that their mother, maybe there was always plenty available, but somehow there was always a fear that it could all be taken away, or there was a kind of stinginess that could come through, not because she was a stingy person, but because there's this fear underneath. So what happens is that those kind of programs get imprinted into you subconsciously without you realizing them. And what I have noticed is that as we go through life at different ages and stages in our life, different aspects of those limitations can start to come through. So I'm going to give you, I want to help you think through this for those of you who are listening in a really practical way that relates to your own circumstances. So if you think to yourself, if you're in the kitchen, for example, and you are just doing your thing, you're making dinner, you're just in your own environment, have you noticed if your mother was always irritated by, say, dishes lying around, or she always insisted on things being done in a certain way in the kitchen, have you noticed that at some point you actually can start to behave in that way? I don't know if this is something you can, it's like those little behaviors, because if we start to pay attention to the little behaviors, to come to your question about how does this imprinting actually work, it does not happen in big headlines.
Mm-hmm.
It happens in tiny behaviors. It happens in that little thought that keeps repeating off to the side of your mind. Do you see what I mean? So if you can start to pay attention to where are your behaviors unconsciously replicating your mother's behaviors, where are your thought patterns starting to replicate your mother's thought patterns? Those are the things we want to catch and dissolve, because that is where it's like they become little shells of restriction that stop you from fully expressing yourself. Do you see what I'm saying? And it can often happen in places like the kitchen, or in your daily walk, or even, in the way that you do the laundry, and in those things that seem to be not at all related to your leadership. But what I've realized over working with many, many different women in leadership positions is that if we start to move the needle on those little behaviors, what actually happens is that shell starts to dissolve and your leadership then starts to shine. So you change your behavior in the kitchen, you go into the boardroom, and you will be a totally different person.
I like that. And I love, Vena, that you are pulling these very like small and like they're really good practical examples, because I think a lot of times when you start having these conversations, you're immediately trying to find the thing like in the workplace, the thing in the career, and trying to pull that, but it really starts in our day-to-day lives and just small things, like you mentioned, small things that you just may not take notice that you're doing that is very similar. And I think to your earlier point, like, yes, just as a reminder that it's not to make anyone feel bad or to speak ill of or to think ill of your relationship with your parent, but this is all really like evolving. It's how are you evolving into, like you said, evolving into like a whole, like the whole of you, and then also just growing, and that opens the door to you to be a better leader, whether it's leadership in your home, or in the workplace.
For sure. And I think that, this piece about looking at particular behaviors and catching particular behaviors, it's like I mentioned earlier, it's what's going on in the wings. So how are those things sort of starting to shrink you, or they keep you small, so that then when you go into the workplace, the truth is we don't leave any aspect of ourselves at the door. Not really. I mean, you can, you of course,
Yeah.
you know, you put on a different costume, if you like, and you go into the workplace, and yes, you present differently, but it's in your unguarded moments. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's because as leaders, we are constantly evolving. We are often going to be in challenging situations. We're often going to be in the unexpected situation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you are in that unexpected situation, that is when your subconscious behaviors come up and sabotage you. Do you see what I'm saying? When you know what's going on, when you are on your territory and it's all going fine and good, you have no problem. That
Yeah.
imprint from your mother is not going to hold you back at all. But when you've got something coming at you from left field that
Mm-hmm.
you didn't see coming at all, now you are off center. So if I use kind of a dance analogy, because
Mm-hmm.
that's my background. So if you're dancing well and you're moving, you are in your center of gravity. You've got your balance. Your balance is really good, and you're flowing and you're moving with the music, and your balance is great. Now, something comes in and it knocks you off balance. Of course, you are going to be reeling to get your balance back.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
your attention has now shifted to try to get your balance back. And that is when the subconscious comes in from outside and can take over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
because
if
you,
we
oh, I'm sorry.
practiced,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
No, no, you finish. Finish.
So if we have practiced, the more we're able to practice dissolving those
Mm-hmm.
subconscious tendencies, that is when we create space for us to come back into our own center. And
Mm-hmm.
in those moments when we're caught off guard, so in those moments when we're caught off guard, you want to be acting from your own place, from your own pattern, from your own energy, not from something that you've received from someone else.
Mm-hmm. I love that, Vena, because it's like when those unexpected moments happen and then we feel a sense of like loss of control. Like you said, well, when you were talking about dancing, I could see it happening. I don't know about anyone. I hope you all listening to could see that, because when you were telling that, using that example, I was like, oh, I can see the person, right? You're off balance and you're trying to focus on getting the balance. But then like you've got all these other things you're gonna like, I didn't expect this to happen. What am I supposed to do? But I think you said the key things is that if you can practice, and if you can almost just like, practice and prepare yourself for the unexpected as much as you can. I think we can do that when we are able to identify the things that might trigger us in these scenarios.
Absolutely. And you know what's coming up for me? I mentioned money a little bit earlier. I want to come back to that if that's okay, because I
Mhm.
think that that's a really key piece. That in our relationship with money, I think, if we think about the opportunities that we have, Kyra, now, our mother's generation, and certainly our
Mhm.
grandmother's generation, they did not have anything like the opportunities we have.
Mhm.
So we are absolutely standing on their shoulders. We are
Mhm.
standing on the path that they made possible for us.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I think of it this way: in order to honor the work that they did, we have to move forward as much as possible.
Mhm.
And I think the piece with money, this is something that I see a lot. With women leaders and even with younger women who are coming through the ranks and we're moving them forward, is that they can get sabotaged around money because of their mother's blocks around money. But
Mhm.
here's the piece I want to kind of reframe, is that your mother's attitude towards money, don't think of it as limited or a block. Think of it as that's what she was doing with her opportunities and at
Mhm.
her time.
Mhm.
And the way that we honor that is to make the best use that we can of the opportunities that are in front of
Mhm.
us.
Mhm.
So that's why it's about letting go of that shell, dissolving her desires and
Mhm.
her kind of view around money and allowing your own to come through. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Yeah. And I actually really resonate with that. And also the reframing of it because my mom and I do that a lot of times, like when we're having conversations and when I'm talking to her about, work and, and my mom, when she was working, she was a leader in her job. And so she would talk about, like what that meant. And then, I'll talk about it. And we are similar but different. Like I'm a bit more vocal. Like my mom, she's very like even, and she'll speak her piece. And when she speaks her piece, people are like paying attention because you think she's like soft spoken or mild mannered, but like really like she is, but she isn't, right? And then like for me, I'm like, well, I used to be that way when I was younger, but then I saw it as like sort of a limiter for me because it was like, you have to be vocal or you're not going to be, taken seriously, or people aren't going to listen, or you're not going to be able, especially when I became a leader of people, because they said it's important. Like if I don't have a voice and can't speak out on behalf of my team, then I'm not going to get them what they need. And so a lot of times we have those conversations and my mom, we're talking and I know like sometimes I say things and it's not as comfortable for my mom because she probably wouldn't have said it that way, that way. But I'm like, okay, but she's like, well, but I still really appreciate the advice, right? So it's like I take the advice because I know that she's done all this before me. And then, but then at the same time, I take that advice, but then she tells me, like, this is really great, that your team has someone like you to speak out. So it's nice to have that balance of like her pouring into me with like, this is good, it's okay if you said something, or you wanted to, make your voice heard. And then I'm also like affirming that okay, it was okay during the time that you were in leadership that you handled things this way, because you never want people, like you said, I mean, they did what they did because of where they were and what they had. And the same thing could be said for our generations, right? Like the people that are coming behind us may totally do it different. But it's like I hope that they can build off of like what women are able to do and what we're able to put in place today to help them grow and evolve in the future.
Without a doubt. And I think that's a really key piece about, we each have different personality and different styles.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's about that, isn't it? It's about understanding and allowing your own style of leadership to come through while you respect somebody else's style, whether it's your mother or anybody else. But you
Mm-hmm.
need to make sure that you are doing what's right in your situation. So that's where you are shining fully rather than dimming your light. Do you see what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So that's
Mm-hmm.
where otherwise, because I think the other piece about voice and authority and speaking with authority,
Uh-huh.
there are many, many different ways of speaking with authority. And the way that I
Mm-hmm.
work with people in terms of stage presence is very much about tapping into what's true for you as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is your true characteristic? So
Mm-hmm.
the way that I speak and move is very, very different to somebody who has perhaps a lot more I would say kind of gravitas and a sort of
Mm-hmm.
heaviness in their style. You know what I mean? It's much more
Oh
kind of
yeah.
I'm a dancer. I have a completely different way of doing.
Vina, I see it as grace. Like I said, you speak very gracefully and eloquently. And I think like that is very powerful. And then
Thank
you
you.
and you do have some people who are very like, wow, wow, they're like they're putting on a different type of show.
Absolutely. And we need all of it because here's the thing, it is about unlocking your individual
Mhm.
full potential and shining fully as yourself.
Yes.
And so that's where I think the authority in our speech comes from being true to ourselves. There is
Mhm.
one thing actually that I would love to share that I think is valuable for everybody, though, because it's a physical bodily thing. Should I share that now?
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So this is to do with speaking in an authoritative way.
Mhm.
Um, And it's to do with bringing that bodily authority into your voice. So I describe it as speaking from your hips, right? Speaking from
Mm-hmm.
your hips, because whenever we're speaking, it's like our attention can be in different levels of the body. Now, mostly we're not aware of this, but if you've got any singers listening to this, if there are any singers in your audience, they will tell you that one of the things that singers do when they train to sing is that they train to sing to allow the voice to come from different parts of the body.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So we it's like applying that to speaking. The point about speaking from your hips is that it gives a groundedness and a rootedness to the quality of your voice that makes it very compelling and very commanding. And I have to say that this is probably the quickest result thing that I teach my clients. As soon as I give it to them, if they put it into practice immediately, and it gets them immediate results. So people who were being talked over by by men mainly in their meetings,
Mm-hmm.
suddenly that stops and people actually listen to them. So the way to do it is just, first of all, let your spine kind of become upright, and you can rock backwards and forwards very gently, just to give yourself a sense of your hips
Mm-hmm.
and that your seat, a sense of your seat.
Mm-hmm.
And then let your attention drop down into your hips. Let your attention drop down into your hips. And you can take a few deep but gentle breaths as if you are breathing in and out of your hips, and get the full sense, front, sides, back. It's your 3D.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you speak, if you allow your voice to come from there, allow your voice to come as if it is rising up from your hips, you will feel the difference in your body. And believe me, that difference will be projected out towards your listeners. So that is something that can work for everybody, whatever your speaking or leadership style
Mm-hmm.
is.
I like it. I like when we get these types of tips, Vina. Thank you. It is
You're
always
welcome.
it always is important. I think you said a lot of great things that just helps people to feel like, because in leadership and a lot of times with the women, we feel sometimes like we have to be like the other person in the room, or we have to be like the man in the room. And I think that's a great example of like some people, men, and no offense, men
Yeah.
listening. We're just using examples of what we've seen in the past, because I used to work a previous job. I worked with a guy who would always talk over, like he talked over everyone. And it was so frustrating for the people in the room. And, and a lot of times people would like let him like cut them, like they just stopped talking. And I just remember I was like, you know what? Like we're not doing that anymore. And I remember like starting to, to speak in a meeting, and he started talking over me. And then I said, so would you like for me to finish, or would you like to pick it up? Because if you, I was like, because if you want to pick up the presentation, then I'll just listen to you. He's like, oh no, 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 that wasn't, I was just, no, 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 I was just, I said, it's okay to have a question or to have a comment. I said, but like, let's just work on letting me finish, and then you chiming in afterwards, if that's good. And then he was like, hey, I mean, I could tell he was embarrassed, but I just felt like it had to be done because he did this thing all the time, and like maybe he didn't notice that he was doing it because no one ever like called him out on it. But I just felt like, and a lot of the women and people in the meeting afterwards says like, oh my god, good for you, good for you, like, because that bothers me when he does that. And I was just like, yeah, like we shouldn't stand for that. And so, and I think like it's that, but to your point too, it just feels like it does diminish the presence of a woman, especially when it's women who are presenting and who are getting spoken over. So it's like figuring out how to find that voice, how to push it. And I think this exercise that you just walked us through is great, because you almost have to like just like hone in on, yourself and your voice and speaking it, and then forget about the people in the room and just, and do your thing, girl.
Absolutely, absolutely. That I mean, I think that piece about centering into yourself
Yeah.
and not focusing on how other people are reacting,
Mhm.
how are they rolling their eyes? Are they paying
Yeah.
attention? Are they
Yeah.
checking their phone? You kind of
Yeah.
have to treat it like a stage. And
Yeah.
you are presenting, the spotlight is on you. You own the stage, you own the space, and your voice is the only one that counts in
Mhm.
that moment when you are giving the presentation. And
Mhm.
this is something that I think, again, because as women or as girls, we're brought up to be relational, to think of the other person, to put their feelings
Mhm.
first. And I know boys do get this as well. I have to say,
Mhm.
boys do get this as well, but they can get other pressures that we don't get so much. Whereas it's really put onto girls in that way to put other
Mhm.
people's feelings first and to take care of the other person's feelings. But when you are doing the presenting, when you're the presenter, when you are the trainer, when you are the leader of the team, you have to be in that leadership role. And it means that your voice is the one that counts in that moment. So you have
Mhm.
to act like it. You have to really embody that star quality and take up space. I think
Mhm.
that's another key phrase I would love for people to take away with them is take up space.
Mhm. Yes. Yes to all those things because everything you said is like, yes, you deserve to be here. I like the use of the star. You are the star of the show. And you are not thinking about what the other people in the room or on the Zoom or like what they're thinking about. Like you center, like you said, center into yourself, do your thing, be the star, rock out.
Definitely. And also, you mentioned another really important point, I think, which is about that guy who was interrupting. He maybe didn't even realize he was doing it. And
Mhm.
I think that that's really true, especially if it's a habit that someone
Mhm.
has. It's not that they mean to be rude, it's not any of that. It's just their unconscious habits coming out.
Mhm.
But it doesn't matter what their intention is actually in a way, because the truth is that he was interrupting and that is disrespectful and diminishing to the
Mhm.
person who's presenting. So
Mhm.
it's about setting a boundary and letting the other person know what kind of behaviors are okay and are going to work in that kind of situation.
Mhm.
I mean, it sounded like you handled it perfectly.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with him after that. And we were really cool after, after that point because he did, say like afterwards, he's like, I'm really sorry. Like I didn't really mean anything by it. And I was like, look, I know you didn't mean anything. I said, but like, it's rude. It gives an appearance of like, you don't care about what I'm saying, or it doesn't matter what I'm saying. And I said, and I also have team members sitting in that meeting and I don't need them to feel like what their manager is saying doesn't matter to the people that we work cross functionally with. And so he understood it from my point of view as well. And I, like I said, I wasn't, but I didn't apologize for like calling him out because he deserved to be called out because nobody else was going to call him.
Absolutely. And do you know what? I think that is also a key piece because it's very easy for us to kind of apologize before we take a power step.
Hmm. Yeah.
What that
Yeah.
actually does, more for ourselves than for anybody else, is it tells us, oh, I'm not really 100% sure about taking this power step. I'm going to apologize
Yes.
in case. It's almost like we're giving ourselves an
Yes.
excuse to hold back energetically.
Yes.
Don't do that.
Yes. I know. Yes, Vina. Oh my gosh. Like you just opened up a small door. And I'll just say this. I know not to hold us on the topic, but yes, whenever you're in a meeting and you have a question and it leads with, oh, I'm sorry, but no, you're not sorry. You have a question. You have a very valid question or a point that you need to make or you like to follow up on, and it's okay. And you don't. And I noticed that a lot of times where women, like you said, apologize even before just asking a question that they have the right to ask. But it's like, what are you saying you're sorry for?
Absolutely. Your voice has every right to take up space and airtime in
Yes.
that.
Yes, yes. Oh, all right. So you have given us a lot of great information, a lot of great tips today. So, how can women who may be listening, someone's listening and they're like, I hear you, Vena, and I want to take that step. I want to be sovereign woman leader so that, they're able to communicate, they're able to say, get that raise they want. They want that respect that they deserve. Like, what is a step that they can take to go down that path today?
Well, for the person who is absolutely ready and, the light bulbs have been going off in your head as you've been listening to us talk here, I have a very special offer just for podcast listeners like yourself. And I'll share the link with you, Kyra, for you to make it available. It's called Release. And it's about us releasing your voice, releasing that next layer of your leadership. It's a one-time meeting, and it will meet like this on Zoom. I'll give you all the details, and we will work particularly with my methodology of tearing up the good girl script. Mm-hmm. So the good girl script is the one that says you shouldn't be doing that because you're a girl. And trust me when I say it follows women leaders around, mm-hmm. absolutely all the way until they tear it up. So that's how we'll be working. I've been working with the script. I started actually in 2009 was the first time I created Tearing Up the Good Girl script, and I started mm-hmm. running it as a workshop since then. And it's one of the best known pieces in my body of work. So I cannot wait to work with you. If you would like to find out a little bit more and look at some more of my material, the best place to find me is on Instagram. And my handle is Notes from the Stage Door, with dots in between. So notes dot from dot the dot stage door. Notes from the stage door. You can go there. And I also have some things on YouTube. So if you just search for my name on YouTube.
I'm over here writing down notes too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've also recently started my own podcast, which is also called Notes from the Stage Door. It's yes. Small, it's just beginning, but you're very welcome to go and have a listen there too.
Yes, please do. Please listen. I love that. Tearing Up the Good Girl script is just fantastic because it is so true. It's like, oh, if you're not doing the things that you shouldn't be doing that, like that's bad girl. Okay, Vena, I love it because Vena's all on top of everything, everyone, because she just went right into all those questions, those follow-ups that I was gonna ask anyway. So what we're gonna do now is we're going to transition into 3 things with Vena. Going to ask you 3 questions that just helps our audience get to know you a little bit better. So the first one is a 2-parter. It is, how do you start and end the day?
Oh, okay, brilliant. I love this question. So I have been doing meditation practices of various kinds since I was about 8 or 9. So when I come out of sleep, mm-hmm. Either there is a particular sound or mantra going around my mind, and if that's there, I will stay with that for some time. Otherwise, I will get up and go to my yoga mat and do something. Mm-hmm. I'm not strict with myself. It doesn't have to be a particular sequence of things that I do, but I get into that space. I light a lamp and I do something, whatever comes out of the body, whatever the body wants to do, to move or to sit or to breathe, I'll do something. So that's how I start my day. And I end my day by preparing for sleep in a very particular way. So, I mean, this is going to open up a whole other topic. But in the yogic tradition, sleep is actually a form of death, and we work with trying to conquer sleep in order to be able to exit the body in death in a conscious way. Right? Mm-hmm. So before I go to sleep, I actually adjust my breathing and withdraw my mind from thought and go into a a space of nothingness as far as possible.
Mhm.
And sometimes I'll leave it there and I'll lie down and go to sleep. And sometimes, though, I will flavor that space with a quality of charm. I'll flavor that space with a quality of charm. And what that means is I just bring this quality of charm and delight into my awareness. And then I lie down and go to sleep. Now, what that does is it means that throughout the time that I'm asleep, that quality of charm, which is extremely important for stage presence, is percolating and building in my system. So that's how I
Oh,
end.
I like that. I'm very intrigued. I'm very intrigued by this practice and how you of you going to bed every night. Like because you're just thinking about it because a lot of us go to bed like a lot of people will do things, right? You'll have this routine, but a lot of times, like for me, I'm still like I have routine that I go through, but then I get into bed and I might watch some TV. I have a spouse, so he comes up and then he's watching TV. I'm like, so your mind, like even if you've like relaxed it, you're still like going into this place of like not chaos, but there are things. There's things. There's people, somebody talking to you, somebody saying, "Oh, look at this, Kyra. Look, Kyra." I just recall this because at like almost 3 o'clock this morning, as we were going to bed, he was, look, look at this. And I was like, dude, I gotta go to sleep. Like I gotta get up early. And I think so I love this because it's really important. It's important for preparation for who you've been called to be and how you need to show up. So it's a really great look at like just go people going to sleep and say, "Oh, I just went to sleep." Like no, like going to sleep should be a preparation like for the next day and for how you want to show up. So, oh, Vina.
I told you I was opening
I
another
mean,
door.
I've been doing it all wrong. So, all right. The second question is, what's a goal or an intention that you set for yourself this year?
Oh, wow. I love this question. So, there's this one sentence that is kind of been playing in my mind, and I'm sharing it as much as I can with other women because it's sort of at the center of my work this year. And it's
Mhm.
this: she who tells the story shapes the world.
Oh.
She who tells the story shapes the world. So,
Mhm.
with your podcast, Kyra, for example, you're telling the story all the time.
Mhm.
And we need this. We need your voice. We need the voices like yours because we need to shape the world in ways
Mhm.
that are uplifting and
Mhm.
nurturing and harmonious and that create global harmony. And it's up to
Yeah.
us. It is
Yes.
up to us. So
Yeah.
she who tells the story shapes the world.
I love that. You need to put that on. We need that on shirts. We need that on
Yeah.
notepads. We need notebooks. We need all those things, Vina. Okay.
Okay,
but
got it.
but that is so true. And it's so fitting, especially for like, just where we are in the world today. So I love that. All right. And the last question is where are you currently finding inspiration?
In dance. It's my perennial, I mean, it just continues growing and growing and growing for me. So I have my own kind of practice. I just let my body, move in its own way because I've become more and more aware of subtler layers of energy that
Mhm.
that happen through movement. So yeah, in
Awesome.
in the in the moving body.
Awesome. I love that. All right. Well, Vina, I just want to say thank you so much for coming and sharing with the Glow Up Girl community today. I have really enjoyed this, and I'm going to ask you one more question before I let you go, which is what are three things you'd like for the audience to take away from our conversation today?
Breathe and speak from your hips. Remember that she who tells the story shapes the world, and your voice matters. When you are speaking, it is your voice that counts.
Awesome. I love that. I love all three. Well, Vena, thank you so very much. Everyone, make sure you go and listen to Vena's podcast, support her in her work. Check out the course. You're going to be able to get it out of the show link. So make sure that you um, do all those things. And just, remember, as Vena just said, like, you have a voice. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to share and tell stories.
Thank you so much, Kyra.
Awesome. Stay tuned, everyone. I'll be right back.